Hey, welcome into another episode of the Fat Guy Podcast. I'm the Fat Guy. Most people just call me Brett. Thank you so much for listening today, checking us out. If it's your first time, welcome in. And special thanks to our Patreon supporters. Cindy Carr, Bessie Williams, Kenneth Wilkerson, Bobby Houston. You guys are amazing. These are basically just people who have chunked a few bucks my way. I like to say they're buying me a Burger King Whopper without the bun. Just a little show of gratitude. These are people that have gotten some value from the podcast. It's helped them learn about eating. It's helped them learn about keto. Maybe helped them lose weight. Maybe helped them get healthier. And they're just saying, hey, you've provided value, and here's a way of saying thanks. If you'd like to do that, you can go to losewithmason.com, LOSEWITHMASON, losewithmason.com. And a lot of perks over there. We do patron-only podcast. I do patron-only post with recipes, research, stuff that doesn't go out in the general podcast, and to provide a little extra for the folks who step up and help here. If you're not following us on social media, Fat Guy Podcast is the username, whether it be Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. So follow us there. And by all means, if you know somebody that's in need of losing weight or getting healthier, you never know when you share this podcast on your page or your social media, they might see it. And it's kind of a sneaky way of helping people, because you know when you get in people's business, they don't like it. Like if you were to walk up to somebody and go, you know what? You weigh 500 pounds, you should try keto. They'll get offended by it or take it personally. Whereas if you just post it on your page, it might pique their interest and they're like, look what happened with that guy. Maybe I might try this. You just never know who you're going to help. And it's a very passive way to do it. Today's podcast is going to be all about a keto miracle. Now, there's a video that goes along with what I'm about to share with you. And the link to that video will be in the description for the podcast. So if you're finding this podcast on Facebook, when you click over to the to listen to this, if you go down to the description section or whatever, in the expanded section, you'll see the link and you'll be able to find it that way. If you're finding us on, a podcasting app like Apple Podcast or whatever app you use in the Google Play Store, you have to actually go to the description of this episode and look in the show notes, and you'll be able to see it there if you want to see the video, because it is quite remarkable. It's a Thanksgiving miracle. We're talking about an 82-year-old man with Parkinson's disease, and not just Parkinson's disease, but, Parkinson's doesn't get any better. Like, it just goes downhill, and they got no help for you early on. I think they can give you some drugs that'll kind of help with the motor response and stuff that happens, but at some point it just deteriorates. It's much like Alzheimer's. It's much like dementia. There's very limited they can do. I did a podcast about Alzheimer's and dementia. It's probably been a year or two ago. I don't know. You'd have to scroll way back to find it. But there's a lot of evidence and anecdotal results, just like this one I'm about to share with Parkinson's, where if you up the fat, you get those carbs out, you see improvement in brain function. And at this point, I have no doubt. I just have no doubt that the diet is greatly contributing to these conditions. It's hard to draw a line and say that it's actually causing them. But when you deprive the body, especially of cholesterol, they made cholesterol out to be the enemy since the 70s. And then once you see actual research that was, because they never conducted research. This Ansel Keys guy went and looked at all these countries and said, oh, yep, fat and cholesterol, we can tell they eat more and they're having worse health outcomes. And everybody just believed him. There was no test. There was no research. And then all these decades later, you're like, somebody's got to thinking, every cell in the body is comprised of cholesterol. You can't build new cells without it. How is it that cholesterol is bad for you? That doesn't make a lot of sense. And so now all the research they're doing on it is confirming that it was all a bunch of bunk. And meanwhile, we've all sacrificed health-wise. I've rambled on enough about it. Let's jump right into this. By the way, you could go follow these people on Instagram. This is where I found the story. Keto2Fitness is the username, and it's the number 2, not the word, Keto2Fitness. And here's what they had to say. This is my 82-year-old father. Unfortunately, he has late-stage Parkinson's disease. And for the past couple of years, he's continued to deteriorate both physically and mentally at a steady and increasingly rapid rate. During only the past few months, he'd become almost completely disabled. Think about that now. Almost completely disabled. Unable to stand without falling. Couldn't get up off a chair or couch. Wasn't able to walk. Even with a walker, he couldn't walk. His cognition had significantly declined. He lost all of his personality, had no sense of humor. The ability to participate in a simple conversation he lost. He forgot how to turn on a TV. He couldn't turn on a computer. Couldn't do any of those things. My father's neurologists and doctors had informed us when he first diagnosed with Parkinson's that he would, like all Parkinson's patients, experience a steady decline in functioning, and that there was nothing, medication or otherwise, that could stop or reverse the decline. The only hope was that the decline might be slowed somewhat by the medication that was prescribed. Not surprisingly, none of his doctors suggested that diet might impact the symptoms in any way, positive or negative. Side note, this is me speaking. Who else is shocked by that? Like, these doctors just don't talk about diet. First of all, they don't know anything about it. They're not taught much about diet. They're not taught much about health and nutrition. I've seen several doctors who are now keto doctors, or they have changed over to having functional practices, talk about how they were lucky to have an hour of nutrition taught to them. You know, you do 8 hours to become, 8 years to become a doctor, and an hour of it is nutrition. I've seen other doctors that said they had 3 days or 5 days devoted to it, but still, out of 8 years or 12 years or however long, depending on what doctor you are, to only have either an hour to just a couple of days devoted to nutrition seems really short-sighted and stupid to me, but I digress. Back on with the text from this post. Although I've been on a carnivore diet for almost a year and experienced so many physical and mental health benefits from this way of eating, I believe all the medical experts that nothing, including diet, could help my father's condition, so I hadn't tried to convince them to change his diet, which was always a diet rich in carbs and sugar. Of course, nearly everybody's diet is. I figured that he suffered enough, at least he could do is be able to enjoy his donuts and ice cream. But about 2 months ago, I could no longer keep my mouth shut and told my parents my belief that my father's low cholesterol, low fat diet, which was prescribed to him by his doctor, was responsible for his brain becoming malnourished and inflamed, and that this had caused or contributed to him developing Parkinson's disease. I suggested that my father eat mostly fatty beef, eggs, liver, and butter, and that he cut down on the amount of grains, sugars, and seed oils that he consumed. My parents took my advice about a month after I suggested it, which was about a month ago today. His symptoms surprisingly began to significantly improve. He's now walking, he can get up from chairs, he can get himself in and out of the car by himself, and his personality, sense of humor, and ability to converse and talk about current events has returned. I'm also, of course, very pleasantly surprised and beyond excited. It has been unbelievable to see my dad regain a significant amount of his functioning. This experience has further strengthened my belief in the power of nutrition, namely a meat-based, non-processed, nutrient-dense diet to help us heal from and prevent a myriad of chronic and quote-unquote incurable diseases. Now, when you watch the video of this guy, remember, this was a guy who couldn't even get up out of the chair anymore. He couldn't walk, not even with a walker he couldn't walk. And if you watch this video, he's up walking on his own with no walker. Now, they have, I guess, a health nurse or something. He has one of those belt straps around his waist, and the health worker is holding on to the back of it to catch it. So in case he starts to trip and fall, you know, he'll have a hold on that strap. But he's not helping him walk. There's no walker. This 82-year-old man who just a month ago couldn't get out of a chair by himself, couldn't carry on a conversation, couldn't get in and out of a car, couldn't even walk with a walker, is scooting right around the living room like nobody's business. His eyes are lit up. He's smiling. He's telling little jokes and laughing. I mean, that's remarkable. Now, I think I'm going to title this. I haven't uploaded this episode yet, so I don't know what I've titled it, but I think I'm going to call it a Keto Thanksgiving Health Miracle. And obviously, if you've listened to what I've just spoken about, it's a carnivore, mostly carnivore miracle. However, the woman who posted this is carnivore, which means she's just eating animal foods only. She didn't say exactly what the parents started, or what they started feeding her father. She indicated there might have been some greens and stuff in there, but it was mostly, the fatty animal foods. So we're not exactly sure, but we know that they cut all the crap out. I've been doing a lot of research on carnivore, and it really helps brain things. There's so many people that I've found who had depression, things like that, mental health, who have switched to carnivore, and without the assistance of any drugs, who wasn't helping them at all, by the way, before, are now functioning normally, and their depression and their issues just go away. And I've also seen lots of stories over the past 2 years about people who had Alzheimer's or dementia, who cut out the grains and the sugars and all that stuff and went to a high-fat keto diet, a really high-fat keto diet, reversed much of their symptoms and have their speech come back, have some of their memory come back, be able to function almost normally and have a lot of that return. None of that now, what I say, was a complete reverse of the disease. None of those put the disease in remission. But it eliminated a lot of the worst symptoms, so that these families got their parents or their grandparents back, a lot of them back, their personality back, their ability to speak back, their ability to walk back, a lot of stuff back. Obviously, when you get a disease that's that serious and that involved and has caused that much damage, it would be a miracle for just changing diet to completely heal it and completely make it go away. Not saying that couldn't happen, but obviously that would be something of an order of great magnitudes. But to have it, to give people their family members back, like in this gentleman's case, God, sorry, I can't talk, 82 years old, couldn't walk, couldn't get in and out of a car, couldn't even figure out how to turn the TV on, lost his personality, wasn't talking anymore. Now he's walking around on his own. He's talking, he's laughing, he's joking. He gets in and out of the car, gets up now down in the chair. I mean, that's remarkable. I decided to go carnivore. It's probably been about 5 or 6 weeks ago now. After all this damage and issues I had with my foot. I actually started it after I come out of the hospital with my deep vein thrombosis in the legs and the pulmonary embolism in the lungs. Not because I thought it would help that in any kind of a way, because I'm just not sure there's anything that can do much for that. But just it's something I had been thinking about, and I know that from my experience of changing out certain plants, eating some plants, not eating some plants, does definitely cause a inflammatory response in me that I didn't like. And I won't get into what those were or what those weren't. But I just wanted to see what eating carnivore would do. So what I've been eating is basically what I was just mentioned in that post I just made, which was meat, steaks, ribeyes. I've eaten some lower fat cuts of steak because it's cheaper, but I've really upped the fat in them by cooking them in butter and then melting butter on top of them. Some good grass-fed butter. Kerrygold is what I use. But eggs, bacon, these type things. And I've eaten some limited dairy, and that's mainly in the form of yogurt. And I felt great. Felt satisfied. I've experienced weight loss with it. The big benefits for me, probably the largest benefit, and so I don't want to get too personal, but hey, that's what podcasts are for, right? You want to know the experience. Constipation and bowel movements have been an issue for a lot of people who go keto. Now, usually once you go keto, which does involve eating green leafy vegetables and stuff like that, the constipation usually with a lot of people will start early on, but it'll resolve and it'll become normal. For me, it was always hit and miss. Like I'd be normal for a while, and then I'd have problems with it for a while. After going carnivore, I would say within about a week and a half of going carnivore, I had no more digestive issues as far as bowel movements or constipation or anything like that happening, and haven't had it since. Now, the interesting thing is, and I've done a lot of a study on this, when you used to eat mostly meat and stuff like that, eggs, your body breaks down and absorbs so much of that, there's very little matter left to pass through. So I could easily now, I'm going 2, 3, 4 days sometimes without even having a bowel movement, but it's not constipation, it's just there's nothing in there. Now you think about when you're eating plants and stuff, which are mostly fiber, your body can't digest fiber. And that's why these vegans who eat a lot of whole plant-based foods are pooping all the time, 2, 3 times a day, and it's large amounts. It's because your body can't digest fiber. And there's actually a patron supporter only post over on my Patreon site, which once again is at losewithmason.com, where I posted the results of a study where they tested the constipation, bowel movements, and that stuff of people on either a high fiber diet, a regular fiber diet, or a no fiber diet. And these were the same people. They did the same test on these same people. These were people who had digestive issues. They had pain, they had bloating, they had constipation, they had bloody stools. And that's a crazy study. I'll give you the short of it, and if you ever decide to become a patron supporter, whatever, that post is over there. But I'll give you the long and short of it. The short of it is, shockingly, when they took all the fiber out of the diet, all those patients, all their symptoms went to zero. They had no more pain, no more bloating, no more constipation, no more blood. All that stuff went away. It was gone. The other thing to that was making their diet high fiber made all those symptoms worse. So all this stuff we heard all these years about, for having digestive problems, you need to up your fiber. It's all complete bunk. It's all complete garbage. Anyway, I know I've gotten way off topic from what was originally the point of this podcast, which was to talk about this keto Thanksgiving health miracle. I couldn't be happier for this 80-year-old gentleman and his family. Again, if you want to just go check out their post on Instagram, Keto to Fitness is the name. It's the number 2, not the word 2. Keto to Fitness. I'll also post a link in the show notes for this podcast. And thank you all so much for checking us out. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. And if you're listening to this at some point in the future and it's July, don't be getting upset because I'm wishing you a happy Thanksgiving. It's coming. There's another one coming up. So I'm wishing it for you then. That's the weird thing about podcasts. You never know when people are listening to them. Could be 5 years in the future, and it could be 6 months opposite of when you're putting it out. Nevertheless, the sentiment is the same. Thank you so much again to my Patreon supporters. If you'd like to check that out, see if it's something that's of value to you, because it's a value to me, that's losewithmason.com. And share this and subscribe. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, we're available on all the podcasting platforms. There's not a platform out there you can find that we're not on at this point. We're on iHeartRadio. We're on Spotify. We're obviously on Apple Podcasts. We're on the Google Play Store. I believe we're still on Stitcher. We're on Podcast Addict. We're on the Spreaker platform. There's just nowhere you can go find podcasts that we're not there. A subscribe would be awesome. Thank you so much for listening today. I appreciate you more than you know, and I wish you the very best in your health and weight loss journey. And if there's anything I can do to help, I try to do my very best. You're more than welcome to shoot me a message. We'll talk to you next time.